Approximately 20 municipalities and states established such ordinances at that time. However, they sat idle for many years and lacked a redress element or enforcement mechanisms. This new model ordinance introduced here in Illinois as HB 1227, the Enslavement Era Disclosure Redress Act, sponsored by State Rep Sonya Harper, has added both components. Not only does it mandate full disclosure from corporations and institutions to their ties to, involvement in, and benefit from enslavement era practices, but it also mandates a contribution to a redress fund and allows for community enforcement. Many Americans are beginning to become more aware that the practices of enslavement created tremendous wealth for this country. Those practices, recognized today as crimes against humanity, are obligated to be redressed, as the legacy of those crimes continue to negatively impact the descendants of those of whom those crimes were originally committed. Every complicit actor, whether government or non-governmental entity, is obligated to redress those actions. In the American system of enslavement, there was broad and widespread complicity by many corporations, institutions, and individuals. Today, states and municipalities, through their powers, can constitutionally require that these complicit actors disclose their actions and contribute to the repair of the many harms resulting from those actions. Today, we want to recognize that Illinois, through HB 1227, again introduced by State Rep Harper, has taken the lead in availing these actors an opportunity to enter into this new era of accountability. This legislation allows them to aid in the repair of the harmful legacy lasting from American enslavement. As they were complicit in the harms, they must be complicit in repair. We have others standing in here recognizing the importance of this landmark bill. You will first hear from State Rep Sonya Harper, who introduced this legislation. She will be followed by State Rep Carol Ammons, who's a co-sponsor and also will lead in this legislation. They will be followed by law professor Britta Redwood, formerly of Howard University Movement Learning Clinic, one of the key crafters of this model legislation, along with Reparations United and the law firm of Aaron Fox Schiff. Following the professor will be statements by our many supporters, nationally and locally. We begin with Reverend Dr. Robert Turner of the National African American Reparations Commission, convened by Dr. Ron Daniels of the Institute of Black World 21st Century. Pastor Turner will be followed by Robert Ruth Simmons of First Repair. Robin is also the initiator of the Evanston, Illinois Reparations Commission. Then we have Miranda Alexandria of the Chicago chapter of the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. Richard Wallace of Equity Through Transformation will also speak, who's also a convener of the Illinois Reparations Commission. And then we'll have a statement by a member of the Illinois Afro-Descendant Citizens Reparations Commission, if one is here. Representative Sonya Harper, our illustrious introducer of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean. Thank you everyone for being here today. We know slavery lasted for more than 200 years. And during that time, African Americans were sexually assaulted, murdered, made victims of genocide, and economically depressed. And while slavery was abolished in 1865, this historic wrong has affected generations to come. The descendants of enslaved people have faced and still face systemic racism and discrimination in real estate, education, political power, employment, and more, preventing thousands of families from building any political or economic power. Meanwhile, individuals and institutions that built generational wealth off the enslavement of others still benefit. This is why I introduced this bill, which would take some steps that we as a state can implement to raise awareness of this ongoing injustice and begin to level the playing field. Under this bill, businesses applying for state contracts would be required to disclose any historic involvement in the holding or trading of enslaved people. If they were, They must disclose that information and create a statement of financial redress. This is done in an effort to pay those who were enslaved family members their share of reparations for the harm their family members endured during slavery. Now, I know that this measure, we know that this measure does not make amends for the devastation inflicted by slavery and racial discrimination. Nonetheless, we feel it is a small step forward in repairing the damage done and providing a sense of hope to so many people. Black Americans, we have waited so long. We have waited so long in vain for our communities to be made whole. After hundreds of years of repression and oppression on so many levels, we've waited long enough. We've waited our turn in line long enough. And so I'm here to say, like the rest of us, that enough is enough. Enough excuses, enough delays, enough broken promises. It's time for us to stop talking about and start acting on the things that we need to do today. I look forward to continuing to educate members of the General Assembly and the public on this issue. I want to thank all of my colleagues who are standing here in support today of this bill. And before I turn it over to Representative Ammons, I just want to say that we are all standing here today because this very bill is nothing but the continuation of the work started by the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus when we passed our historic pillars back in 2021, creating the Illinois African Descent Citizens Reparations Commission. Part of creating that commission was creating the very act that we're talking about today. So we're following our own laws with the very bill that we are here introducing and hope to get through the General Assembly today. I, at this time, would like to turn things over to my colleague and my sister in the struggle, Representative Carol Ammons.
Thank you. My name is Carol Ammons, A-M-M-O-N-S. I represent the 103rd District, which is in Central Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. I am here first and foremost to stand alongside my colleague in the effort to put this front and center in the state of Illinois. We've taken several actions to lead to this point, as she has mentioned, the actions that were taken to establish the commission. We've also passed resolutions identifying the specific harms that our community has suffered, similar to Recharge Genocide resolution that we passed a few years ago after the murder of George Floyd. What we have experienced in the Black community is unprecedented. People speak to us and say, reparations, well, that's not fair. That was a long time ago. Well, I just want for the record to identify really that is not that long ago. And in the United States, since its early days, it has systemically provided reparations to other communities. And I just want to remind those in the media of that point. We've paid reparations to the Japanese Americans in the United States. We've paid reparations on Jewish claims of Australia. We paid to Indian and Eskimos in Canada, and the amounts are staggering. We paid to the Ottawas of Michigan. We paid to the Chippewas of Wisconsin. We paid to the Seminoles of Florida. We paid to the Sioux. We paid to the Klamath, to Alaska Natives, to the German Jewish settlements. And who we have not paid is the African American, the descendants of the enslaved. However, it is economically demonstrated that the free labor of those who went before us established the very United States of America. It also established in the southern mines of Illinois, the great state of Illinois. So as a major exporter of goods and services around this world, we, the descendants of the enslaved, deserve to have our harms repaired. Reparations are just that. The purpose of them is to restore what had been damaged. And if we look at every single war that the United States has been in since its inception, it has been dealt with when it comes to repairing the harms in other nations. We've seen it in Germany. We've seen it in every war, World War I, World War II. We saw it in Iraq. We saw that all over the world, where we know on the international level, it is supposed to be part of the harm repair, which is to repair the people back to their original state that they were before the incident interrupted them. And so today, we believe that policy alone cannot close the economic gap that exists for hundreds of years for African Americans. And if we stop a moment and just think of a simple game that we have all learned to play called Monopoly. We play Monopoly and we enjoy that game. My husband wins every time. He has a head start every single time we play because he understands the fundamental purpose of Monopoly. Monopoly is designed to get you around the board to acquire assets, land, real estate. That is what Monopoly is. But if you can't start and you're not even on the board when the game starts. So the game goes on for the first 244 years without compensation to your people, direct descendants. So you're in the game of Monopoly for 244 years with no compensation. At 1865, when they said you were free, they had a discussion in Congress, and you can look it up. And they said, well, what are we going to do? We have to repair the harm. They said, no, we're going to give them a pseudo citizenship, second class. 1866, they give away millions of acres of land, not just in the Midwest and the West, but all over this country for land grant institutions, along with other individuals who own the railroads, the waterways, the soil, and everything else that went to the white descendants of the persons who enslaved. So if we are going to be honest today, our honesty requires us to look truthfully at the American story and reshape it to its actual facts so that people will know that you're not giving us a handout, you're giving us what is deserved to those who are descendants of the enslaved. And no policy that we pass in this building will ever close the economic gap that went on for 400 years. We will not close the educational gap that went on for 150 years before we even got access to education. So we are behind in every single social indicator and determinant of health. And we will not close that gap by starting at zero. So our goal today is to support our colleague, Representative Sonya Harper, and to encourage others to introduce additional legislative initiatives that will address all of the economic harm that has been done to the African American community in the state of Illinois. And certainly I shout out my colleagues in New York and other states that are doing the same. Thank you so much, and I'll turn it back over.
Thank you. Professor Redwood.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Britta Redwood. I am a professor of law at Seton Hall University, and I was formerly the director of the Movement Lawyering Clinic at Howard University Law School. Slavery is an institution that was the source of unprecedented wealth in the South, the North, and indeed around the globe. Recent scholarship by economists at Princeton have demonstrated that slavery was the engine of the Industrial Revolution. At the same time, the legacy of slavery and the racist attitudes and institutional practices that undergirded and bolstered it have left very many in its long and dark shadow. People in this country fought and died to create the conditions of legal equality, but economic equality has proven far more elusive. The racial wealth gap that existed at the time of Dr. King's death remains largely unchanged to this day. As we heard from Representative Harper, racial justice and reparatory justice is a human right. This bill allows us to confront our past with honesty in a way that honors the dignity of those whose labor and capital has so long been exploited, and in a way that invites and indeed challenges those who have benefited from that exploitation to make things right. Thank you so much.
National African American Reparations Commission.
Honored to be here, stand in solidarity and support this bill presented by these great legislators to address and as a first step to providing redress for the worst sin in our nation's history that institutionalized enslavement of people that literally built not only this nation, but this very building that we're in. We have, in this moment in time, the opportunity to be an example for the world. This state capitol that we're sitting in is the tallest state capitol in the United States. Let it not be just tall in stature, but stand tall on principle, and stand tall on the principle of providing reparations, redress to those that literally built this very place. I am an advocate for reparations, have been all my life. I walk every month to DC from Baltimore, 42.9 miles, written a book, Creating a Culture of Repair. And this is one of the major examples in how we can bring repair, not just Black people, but for the state of Illinois to heal from this atrocious act of racism and enslavement. This bill is very, very, very thought through, and I appreciate the hard work that went into and the scholarship that went into providing it. And now we will look to the legislators to vote. Where do you stand? It's not enough for you just to celebrate Dr. King Day on Monday. It's not enough for you to have MLK March. It's not enough for you next month to do something for Black History Month. Black history is now. We are making history today. Where do you stand on this issue right now? What would your grandchildren say about how you would vote on this bill? We can always applaud and congratulate the hard work of Dr. King, and we should. We can applaud the hard work of someone from Illinois, Abraham Lincoln. But what are we going to do now? Will the history books talk about you in a favorable light as being a part of the legislature that brought redress reparations for the first time in the state of Illinois? I pray to God that you all have the courage and the backbone to pass and the governor to sign this bill. God bless you.
Thank you. Robert Simmons, First Repair, former Evanston City Councilwoman. I want to start with a thank you to Cam Howard of Reparations United, along with all the movement partners and legislators that co-created Illinois House Bill 1227. This legislation is a monumental step forward in our collective journey toward reparative justice. Strengthening the slavery disclosure redress is not just an essential move, it is both just and attainable. For far too long, we have operated within a ceremonial loop, offering apologies without concrete actions to rectify the injustices that have been inflicted upon our communities. Accountability has been the missing piece of the reparative justice puzzle. And until we enforce that accountability, we risk perpetuating the racial gaps and sustained harm we aim to repair. This bill represents an exciting opportunity for the state of Illinois to build on its history of bold leadership. It is time for us to move beyond mere words of apology and take action that reflects our commitment to justice. This is also a pivotal moment for corporations across our state. They have a unique chance to right past wrongs in tangible and reparative ways. For far too long, many have profited from systems that have harmed our communities, and now they have the opportunity to invest in healing and reparations. This redress mandate of HB 1227 could serve as a vital funding mechanism for the Illinois African Descendant Citizen Reparations Commission as they develop proposals for reparations in our state. It is a blueprint for all dormant slavery disclosures bills nationwide, and a meaningful way to add to the reparations portfolios advancing in the local movement across the United States. Let us embrace this moment with enthusiasm and resolve. I am excited and believing in our Illinois legislators. Thank you.
Randy Alexandria, National Coalition of Black Churches, Chicago chapter, and lead organization.
So first of all, can I just say, echo the thank you to everyone who's in this room supporting this bill. That's number one. Number two, understand that the millennials are here. We're going to keep fighting for reparatory justice through Generation Z, Alpha, Beta, until we get what we need in order to survive and thrive. Now, let's just be clear. This legislation is a landmark, history making, and anyone with a sound moral compass could fully support this bill. And it shows that the state of Illinois is ready and willing to stand behind the descendants of emancipated enslaved people who are its residents. All I can say is that we will lead where the country will not. And it is time for us to make this change, because let us not mistake, this legislation is only a drop in the sea of reparatory justice, but it's going to start a ripple effect around the country. So we can make sure that we are getting the reparatory justice that has been so long denied to our ancestors. I'm just going to say it's not our fault that justice has been delayed, denied, and disallowed. It's not our fault that this type of legislation and more wasn't passed after the Civil War. It's not our fault. And with that, all I can say is that this great state is well underway to make sure that this legislation is signed into law, because it's about 1227 and making sure it gets to the governor's office. Now, because Chicago has passed this bill, I'm hoping that we can work together in the state of Illinois and show as an example of how we can work together, where the pitfalls were, and how we can make sure it is enforced as we go forward. Because it's not just about us. It's about this entire country participating in reparations and the reparatory justice that is needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Wallace, lead and convener of the Illinois Reparations Coalition.
Hello, Richard Wallace, founder of Equity and Transformation, also known as EAT, based in Chicago. I have the amazing opportunity to serve the Austin, Inglewood, West Garfield Park communities along with Joliet, Illinois. We modeled a program called the Chicago Future Fund, which shows what the impact of compensation looks like on the psychological wellness, income volatility, recidivism rates in Black households. It's called the Chicago Future Fund, and I'm sure that there's a lot of learnings that we can use to apply to this. And I think we're living in a moment right now where we need to be bold. We need to be bold. We have to be bold, specifically in our progressive sectors, right? Progressive states. We got to be as bold as they are, as the opposition is. And I think in this moment, the why is as important as the what. So I think we have to lay a foundation, right? And that foundation is the why, right? Because oftentimes we see DEI, we see criminal justice reform, we see economic justice initiatives, but there's a foundation to why. And that is because of the legacy of chattel slavery. And I think that oftentimes we often get it mixed up, right? The initiative around criminal justice reform is related to the harms that occur to our communities. The initiatives around DEI are related to the harms that happen in our communities. And so reparations is that foundation. And if Illinois could be one of the first states to actually fulfill that commitment, right? How much bolder, how much more long lasting, how much more permanent will the solutions around DEI, around criminal justice reform, around economic justice reform, how much stronger will they be if they're built on a foundation like reparations? And so I'm excited about what is to come around HB 1227. I'm excited to be in a state where reparations is actually moving forward. The work of Robin Rue in Evanston, Miranda, Chicago, Black Roots Alliance, of course, Cam and Colburn. Look, we are working and we believe that we will win. And hopefully y'all know that our assignment, Equity and Transformation, is to take this work and move the people. Oftentimes it sits in rooms like this. We got to go door to door, community to community. And shout out to the state of Illinois for building the R3 map, because we know exactly where our people are at. And so we're going to knock those doors and we're going to win the people, because in this game, you either got money or you got people. We ain't got no money, so we're going to get these people. So that's our work, and I'm grateful, and thank you, Cam, for inviting us out. I'll pass it back to you.
We're gonna ask the state rep to come back in, and we're gonna just open it up for questions from you guys. Let me get the state rep back in.
Folks, thank you for being here and welcome to the Blue Room. Corporations, behavior and policies, et cetera, that you're talking about. What are some examples here in 2025?
And well, let me just say, as the well put, the foundation of reparations is the foundation that should be laid upon. We have a colleague in New York, an attorney named Deirdre Farmer-Pellman, who have been suing corporations for their complicity, similar to the insurance industry, like Citigroup, who's insured the slave trade itself, benefited from the insurance industry because of the bodies that they enslaved and then put a bond on. And if those bodies were lost, of course, the people who bought them got the payout. Now, think about that. Citigroup, all of these large corporations that have built themselves to be giants in American economic policy have benefited directly from slavery. And there are many, as you can do as a reporter, you can do a little bit of investigative journalism and look at all of the insurance companies and look up attorney Deirdre Farmer-Pellman. She's in New York City. She was the first person to put the actual case to sue the corporations on the day.
So this is behavior that corporations engaged in during slave days.
It's all institutional. It's
Since
all
the slave
generational since the slave days, but also you're talking about the plantations themselves. So there's a whole line of this that need to be corrected. And if you had done so in 1865, we probably wouldn't be standing here right now. If you had done it in 1965, we probably would not be standing here right now. But since it has not been corrected, the African-American community has suffered economic apartheid from the day that we were released, and we have to correct that harm.
Are you talking about state money and where's that going to come from? Or is it strictly the corporation's money?
Just add to the last question. It's not about current harms of these corporations. It's about the crimes that they committed during the period of enslavement that still affect the descendants of those original crimes today. If there was no continued impact, we wouldn't be having this talk right here today. But there's continued impact. That impact was created by not only the government, the federal government, state governments like Illinois, local governments like cities around the state of Illinois, but there were also corporations and institutions that were also part of the broad system of enslavement. And those corporations and institutions are very rich today as a result of the investment of that original stolen wealth over centuries. And they have an obligation, as the governments have an obligation, to be complicit in the repair. And America is moving toward repair. And the more America moves toward repair, with the governments addressing this issue, we have from the federal government is almost there. The more the the government structures get involved, we know that the private structures had complicity to this harm will also have to get involved. And this particular legislation is affording them that opportunity. It's not a punishment act, but it's affording them opportunity to address the harms that they were part in committing.
So is there going to be?
And so we're going to have some other questions, but yeah.
Is there going to be federal funds or state funds involved, and where's that going to come?
These funds are from corporations and institutions that want to do business with the state. We got to get the price.
It was just a few years ago, I think the city of Evanston made history by actually establishing a reparations program. Has there been enough time, or has that been in place long enough to see whether or not it's had any measurable impact on the target community?
Thank you for the question. So it was in 2019 that Evanston passed the nation's first local tax-funded reparations bill. And disbursements have been taking place. The city of Evanston has dispersed between $5 and $6 million in direct benefits. And we can begin to measure the impact, the economic impact, but more so the changing of hearts and minds, making reparations more common sense and commonplace, and it filtering into every area of government, industry, institutions in our city. In a more scientific way, Professor Al Tillery at Northwestern University Center did a study on the sentiments and the outcomes of reparations in the city of Evanston, Illinois. It showed how it changed the opinions of reparations in all communities. We have more ally support for reparations. It showed how every community in Evanston now believes more in the government, trusts the government more, that reparations has been implemented. And it has been a trickle-down effect into hiring and appointments and opportunity and inclusion and leadership in the city of Evanston. So we have been able to measure it. No, we have not closed the racial wealth gap. I think our leader here said that there's no policy alone that'll do that. This is intergenerational work. Miranda is leading our young people. This is a long road ahead of us, but we are beginning to see the impact and measure it in Evanston. And it has inspired a national movement. As Cam mentioned, there are over 100 localities that have introduced reparations. Many more have begun to develop proposals. Some of them have set aside budgets and others are beginning on their implementation path. So yes to the impact happening and being able to measure it in Evanston.
Here and then there.
If this became law, would this have any impact on ongoing contracts with the state? Or would this be like just contracts going forward?
From my understanding, this would be for contracts going forward. So those who are seeking to do business with the state, in order for you to be able to get that contract, you would have to comply.
So let's say the bill passes and you get the money. How will the money be distributed?
So we're working on a process to put that in place. We're moving through the Illinois Afro-Descendant Reparations Commission and asking them to help us with crafting that particular policy. But we've undergone various community outreach type of programs to know what the residents in Illinois, who are descendants of enslavement, want their resources to be targeted towards. So we'll have to figure out a way on how to make sure that those resources be targeted toward those reparative initiatives.
Do you have any idea what those resources are? Do you have any idea what those resources would be that people are wanting money?
It depends on how many corporations and institutions who fit that particular model of having a past complicity with the crimes of enslavement. Depends on how many of those corporations and institutions want to do business with the city will determine how much resources goes into the redress fund. We want to get press on it before we get your press. Your question. Yes.
Okay, you mentioned land ownership. So are you working on the land ownership right now? Is that something that your work that's in the future, or is land ownership in the bill right now? Folded into the bill.
I don't know who mentioned land ownership.
I thought I heard something.
As it stands right now, we don't address land ownership in the bill.
You're going to be addressing that.
We're addressing that in our reparations commission overall and in the everyday bills that we bring up.
So land ownership has not been addressed currently. So right now you have something with the Evanston that's been something with the reparations in Evanston, but it had nothing to do with land ownership. Right?
It did, but it's specific to Evanston, Illinois only.
Okay, so I wanted to know exactly the impact of land ownership with Evanston. If you could briefly tell me something about that.
I'll keep it super brief because we're here for HB 1227. The best source of information is cityofelvanston.org/reparations. Complete transparency on the legislation, the program. It is intended to build wealth through home ownership for those that have been harmed in Evanston, and all those details are there.
Okay, but it's not necessarily land ownership.
We have one back here and one here.
What you just mentioned about helping people get home ownership is kind of a transition to what I was going to ask. You know, a lot of times when people are getting assistance from the government, it's been through tax help or through stimulus check. Are you hoping that the organizations have enough money to provide the state that it could be something along those lines of financial assistance, potentially getting more people housing services, things like that. So it could be statewide instead of just giving it to state funds where it could go to anything.
So it'll be in a specific redress fund that will be solely targeted toward redress elements in communities that have been historically impacted by enslavement and some of the post-enslavement apartheid type practices in Illinois. So that's where we go. One particular example, when this legislation was first passed in Chicago in 2001, there was a disclosure requirement by CSX Railroad. And one of the things they did initially was to contribute into a fund that gave down payment assistance to people who were looking for homes in these communities. That program has since ended, but that was one example of how this disclosure and redress element played out and could play out in the future. Here. Yes.
Yeah, my question was to Representative Harper. I noticed that you were getting emotional during this press conference, and to step out a bit, I mean, is this something you've been working on for a while? How much of seeing this bill pass mean to you?
See, it's not that it's been something that I've been working on for a while, though. Yes, I've been working on this issue in the General Assembly. I mean, but as a Black American, it's something that I'm deeply passionate about, right? Mm-hmm. I have seen and I feel and I continue to experience and live the results of what we went through with slavery, the results of systemic racism, right? I lived in a food desert community. I go to sleep to the sound of gunshots most nights. I cannot find a healthy restaurant. There are no hospitals and clinics. I mean, and the list goes on and on and on. And I can see how the life that I've been living and the struggle and how it has been so hard, and how as a woman and as a Black person, I've had to work 2, 3, 4 times as hard just to make it to the same level in society that other people have to make it to. I feel that every day. And it's a shame, but my daughter is going to feel that, and potentially her daughter as well, right? If we don't stop today and be able to take some remedial actions toward a group of people who have been serving redress for a very long time in this country. You know, America has become, you know, one of the greatest nations. And as we see, everybody from around the world wants to be here. Why do they want to be here? Because we built this nation. Well, we got nothing back from it, right? And then we see people come from other nations and then look down on us and get more than us, and they don't know the story. So when America is able to apologize and then take some actual tangible remedial steps to solidify that apology to us, I think that we'll be in a better place. And I also want to say it's not just us here, Black folks here in America, right? That's what we're fighting for, Black folk here in Illinois. But my brothers and sisters all across the diaspora are suffering today from the effects of slavery and colonialism, and we can feel it in the way that we are treated in every country that we set foot on this globe. So yes, it is emotional. We can take the last two.
Take the last two. Here and then
Who's in charge of deciding, let's say a company is found that it does have a history of slavery, who's in charge of deciding how much that they then pay in toward reparation? Does there's a formula for that? And does the state holds it then?
we're in the process.
So we have left parts of that open in the bill, and we are seeking further input from our Reparations Commission here in Illinois. I am a commissioner on that commission, and this is something that's now on our agenda as we seek to further look like what does reparations in a holistic way look like for the state of Illinois. That's the commission's job, right? What this bill is just a specific tiny piece of that and helps to inch our work forward and be able to answer some of those bigger questions as to how and what payments will look like and where they'll come from and how they'll be divvied out. We haven't even got to that part yet. Nowhere near.
Just a final question is, you were talking about this as, a small step towards it. Do you know what step 2 looks like?
What does step 2 look like? Step 2 looks like a lot of different things. I can't necessarily say it. Everybody working in their different issue areas would say a different thing. They're very much though looking forward to the recommendations from our Illinois African Descent Reparations Commission, because those are the people that we have put the onus on to help us figure this out. And I don't know if you've been following their work, but right now the Reparations Commission is on a statewide listening tour, and they're going from city to city to city. They just left East St. Louis. They're on their way to Evanston. They were in my backyard in Inglewood a couple of months ago, and they're getting feedback from the residents and from people and from folks and advocates who are working in this space on giving us recommendations to some of those very answers to those questions.
All right, that's the last question.
This is very quick. I just want to let you know, as a means of support, the Black Psychiatrists of America, one of their co-founders was Dr. Patricia Ann Newton, have pressured the American Psychiatric Association to disclose their ties as an institution with the whole enslavement process. And American Medical Association and other professional associations are now getting involved. So that's something that I'm a cultural neuroscientist, so I can help make that information available to you to strengthen this bill, so the governor will sign it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Are we still there? Let's go.
Okay, everybody, like, hold on real quick. Thank you.